Morning everyone, it's Clive. Welcome to the Mitchell Brewery. It's another lovely sunny day in Nottingham. As you can see, I've got the boiler on. We're up to about just over 90 degrees C. This went on at 7:30 this morning, so it's getting there. I've got my mash tun and I've got my malt and my hops all ready. And today I'm going to be making something called Chaos Theory, which is a Brewdog beer. If you go online and search for DIY dog, you'll find all of the Brewdog recipes, even the ones that haven't quite produced yet, which is fantastic. I've substituted a couple of the malts. I'm using Maris Otter instead of pale, and I'm using amber instead of the caramel malt. I'm using crystal, and the only hop involved in this is something called Nelson Sauvin, which is the hop used in Punk IPA. Now I was very lucky. This is quite hard to come by, and I found a batch of supply of this from a shop in Edinburgh, and here we go, I'm all ready. Let the brewing fun begin. Here we go. This is the Maris Otter pale malt. Okay, you can see that the water in my boiler is at boiling. I've got to turn this off now, and I've got to let this cool to less than 80 degrees C. I've got an old kitchen digital scale that I use for weighing out the malt. So here we go, I'm going to add it in kilogram amounts. So I'm just going to weigh out the first kilo. Okay, this boiled water has cooled to less than 80 degrees C, and what I'm going to do now, I'm going to put 9 litres of this using my trusty container into here, and this is the first 800 grams of Maris Otter. It's going to go in here. I'm going to quickly fill this up with another to make it up to 5 kilograms. Okay, I had to improvise a little bit here. I had plenty of Maris Otter, there's loads there, plenty of crystal. However, I only had about half the amber, so I added more crystal and then I topped up with torrefied wheat. No idea why I chose that one, but there you go. And it's all in here now. So what I need to do now is give this a good mix so that all of the grain is in contact with the water, because the idea is that the water is going to be dissolving the sugar away from the malt. This is today's yeast. It's a craft series yeast, and it says here that it's suitable for IPAs, which is Chaos Theory. And what I've done, I've added 110 mils of boiled water to this cup, and I'm going to wait until it's less than 30 degrees C, and then I'll tip in the yeast to hydrate it. I thought I'd tell you about these. These are proto-flock tablets. They're basically for fining, for settling out fine material, things like the proteins that will be in suspension in the wort at the very end after you've added the hops. And each of these tablets, about 2 grams, they're made from refined seaweed, and they act on the fines and they sort of coagulate them, so they basically stick them together to form larger clumps of fines which then settle out at the bottom, and hopefully they are then not transferred into your beer. And you're doing this in the hope that at the end you'll end up with a nice clear beer when you drink it. So there you go. I shall add one of these about 10 or 15 minutes before the end of the hot boil. Now I'm going to reveal the mash tun. I'm just going to take off the cover. This is, as you know, one of my favourite parts of the brewing process. For when you take the lid off, you get this lovely malty goodness, this aroma. Oh, fantastic. It's all about. So basically, this malt has been sitting in this water, which is then dissolved the sugar. What I'll do first is run off the first flush of solution. Now this will contain fines, so what I'll do is I'll run this off and then I'll put it back into this bed of malt. Will act as a filter bed to then capture those particles. This is the first flush of the sugary solution, the sweet wort. You can see the particles. Let's have a bit of a taste. Oh, that's lovely. However, I'm not making a sweet malty drink, I'm making beer, so that'll go back in the boiler, don't worry. It'll be sterilised because this is going to get boiled again. Next step is to sparge. So basically I've connected up this pipe with this fine rose from a watering can, and this basically will sprinkle this boiled and cooled water through here. So just turn the tap on, and as you can see, I'm just going to play it across the surface of the malt to try and extract as much of the sugar out of this malt as possible. So we've got a lot of this to go through. This is going to take about another 15-20 minutes to go through here, so I shall crack on. Sparging is finished, so there's nothing left in here. It's still got to drain through here, so I've got about 15 litres, so I'm going to add this into the boiler to get a start on boiling of the sweet wort. As usual at this stage, the sweet wort is about 56-57 degrees before it goes back into the boiler, so there's some heat left in here. That's frustrating. The boiler stopped, and it's the age-old problem. There's a lot of sugar in this sweet wort and it's coated the element and it's basically cut out. So I'm going to have to empty out this 99 degrees centigrade solution and then clean the element and then stick it back in again. So that is very frustrating. There you go, you can see sugar is coated around the elements here. It's not as bad as it can be. There was quite a lot of sediment in here as well, so I think it was a combination of sediment and sugar coating on the element that made it cut out. Okay, boiler refilled and it's reheating again. It's down to about 80 degrees C, so it's at least probably something in the order of 45 minutes delayed on where it was before. Hey ho. First hop edition of Nelson Sauvin goes in at the start of the boil. Here we go. The hop boil is one of my other favourite stages of brewing because you start to get all the lovely aromas coming from the hops. So this is where our sweet wort is converted into bitter wort. This is the copper chiller. This goes in the boiler when it's all finished, and this will rapidly cool the bitter wort down to less than 30. Basically we have water coming in at the bottom and it sort of whizzes round and then comes out, and it's a really efficient heat exchanger. When it comes out here initially you can really feel how hot it is here, and it rapidly cools this down within about 10 or 15 minutes. Otherwise it would take a long time for this to cool down. I've just popped the chiller into the boiler because the chiller itself needs to be sterilised. In goes the Protofop tablet. Right, that's it. That's an hour and a half. Turn off the boiler. Okay, let's turn on the chiller. Just double check nothing spurting out at this end here. Yeah, and immediately you can feel the warm water coming out of this end. Amazing that this works, this process. So, whoop, get it squirting in there. You can see that? A little bit of steam coming off of that. There we go. The yeast has hydrated nicely, so that will do. I'm going to have a go at this hot bag. So basically I'll boil some water, pop it in this with boiling water for 10 minutes and see how it goes. 500ml, this is like making a very strange cup of tea. That's taken less than 20 minutes to cool to less than 30, so here we go. I'm going to leave the chiller in there. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to tap off this. It's looking a little bit murky, this stuff, so that's because I've used pelleted hops. So my plan is to put a filter bag, like a muslin bag, on the end of the tap, and hopefully that will capture some of the particles. It might be a bit messy. Let's see how we get on. How long is this going to last? It seems to be doing the trick, but I've got a feeling it might suddenly pop off. The moral of this story is, don't put pellet hops in your boiler. Put them in the muslin bag, then put them in the boiler. This was silly. Okay, I've got just under 20 litres of bitter wort. Next thing to do is add the hop bag and that water, that hop tea, and then add the yeast. Okay, let's do the hop tea first. Literally just pour it. And then we'll add yeast. And then put the lid on. Here we are, 4 days after the bitter wort went in with the yeast into the primary fermenter, and the first stage of fermentation is completed, and I'm ready to transfer this into a pressure barrel. I'm going to put this in the pressure barrel overnight, and then tomorrow I'm going to bottle up with my bottles. I've just added some finings, and I've got 71 grams of brewing sugar that is going to go in here, and what I'll do is I will dilute this into a solution with some of this and then add in to the pressure barrel. Let's just take the lid off and have a look inside, and what you can see is most of the yeast has settled to the bottom of the container, and you can see the hot bag in there that I added, the extra Nelson Sauvin, and I've got here my nicely sterilised siphon, which I'm just going to pop in and then siphon this into the pressure barrel. We've got the siphon in place, and you can just about see the siphon at the bottom of the container and into the pressure barrel. That'll take about 10 or 15 minutes to siphon 20 litres from the primary fermenter into the pressure barrel. Here we go, end game in sight. I've left this barrel overnight. I'm now going to decant this into the bottles. I've got about 40 bottles here. Probably won't get all of these filled. These have been thoroughly sterilised. They've been soaking in water, so I'm just going to empty them all out. Put a tip of a teaspoon of this brewing sugar into each one, and then cap them all with a crown capper. There we go, 36 bottles all filled up and capped. That's it for this brew. Cheers everyone, happy brewing.